Hello and welcome to Karen's Colours. I'm Dr. Karen and these are my colour conversations. This week we're going to be looking at creating a blue personality. We've looked at blue before in terms of idioms, but this time we'll be looking specifically at how the blue personality is put together. Before we begin though, I'd like to welcome back those of you who've been watching and following this channel, particularly those who've subscribed and those who have commented. Likes would be nice because it helps the algorithm, but I'm more concerned with giving you information that you can use when you go out and about in your everyday. I'd particularly like to welcome any new people watching this video and hope that you get something out of it that you didn't know that you probably already knew. That's the purpose of looking at colour as an adjunct to personality. So let's get started. As with all of the videos in this series of growing colour personalities, blue is an interesting one because it is one of the most commonly accepted colours in our modern world. An overview of what we're going to be looking at today is firstly, the history and importance of blue as a basic colour term. Then I'm going to look at how personality arises post the infant period of life and how feedback and experiences will determine both the type of blue response in later life and also some of the idioms and concepts that we associate with the colour blue. And then, as per usual, we'll be looking at stress responses and revise those in terms of not only what the most common responses are, but also how they link to concepts of black and white. So let's examine our little mannequin. The basic black and white means there is a tendency to introversion or extroversion. These occur in infancy. If you want more information about these, I've dealt with those in detail in creating the black and white personality. I'll put a link to that particular video in the description below. Red is the colour of survival and power, and it's the first of the basic colour terms that we these days regard as colours in their own right. Yellow is the next one that we explored, which looks at how we learn from experience, and that combined with green, which develops values about those experiences, will then lead to the colour that we're dealing with today, and that is the colour blue. We must have both the ideas and concepts associated with yellow and green before we can develop into the blue stage. And that's why blue does not occur in infancy, but rather occurs a little later down the track. In fact, blue as a basic colour term has not been around for very long, although perception of the colour blue has been around for a very long time. It's a social phenomenon, as are all colours. We label the colour space according to the divisions that are of importance to us. And so the value of those colour concepts lies in the social concepts that we attach to the colour blue. There are both good and bad associations with the colour blue, and for this you'll need to have a look at the Blue Idioms video, which I will also link in the description below. Blue itself is quite prolific in nature. It is seen in sky, in water, and also in the flora of the earth. Interestingly, flies and mosquitoes prefer blue to any other colour. So if you're in an area that is infested with both mosquitoes or flies, I suggest that you avoid wearing the colour blue because it will be an attractant to those insects and you're far more likely to be disturbed by them. The blue dye itself, however, is both difficult to make and expensive to reproduce as a natural item. It was known, however, back in Neolithic times, where they used a particular plant called woad. And this plant grew native to both northern Europe, but also out in the east, where it was very common. Now, this particular plant was used by drying out its leaves or picking the dried, almost desiccated and dead leaves from the plant itself and rubbing them together, which then caused a dark blue dye to emerge. That blue could then be mixed with various other substances to create dyes for painting the body, or else to add to natural fibers to dye clothing. It did not have other social uses such as cave paintings because it could not sustain its colour for any length of time. The plant stuff itself, however, was imported into Europe at a much later date. If we look at it historically, we find that the Egyptians prized a blue stone known as lapis lazuli. Now, this stone was imported and it was found to be rather difficult to carve, but it did create some rather beautiful jewellery and funeral ornaments. The ground stone was also used in paint to paint walls and other features of funerary ornaments, but it has not sustained its colour well over time. The Romans saw blue as a fairly valueless item. They didn't actually have a word for it because oceans and waterways were linked to the weather and the phenomenons of those colours rather than to the colour blue itself. In fact, blue was associated with barbarians because barbarians, having the natural woad plant available to them, would decorate their bodies and their clothing in blue, and so therefore increased the fearsomeness of their appearance. This, for the Romans, then became associated with the colour blue and was therefore very much denigrated as a colour to be desired. In the Middle Ages, blue was finally given a word of its own. That word was different for different languages, but eventually we settled on a form of blue as the name for this particular colour. And later on, it became rather important when it was added to the lexicon of colour terms associated with the rainbow. It was used to classify various hierarchies. And again, when we look at the Blue Idioms video, you'll find that the hierarchies were often associated with those people who could afford to import the particular dye that created blue. As an expensive item, it was considered to be appropriate for designating Mother Mary, and so became part of the religious lexicon used by early Christians. That persists till today. Modern Western culture, of course, has great preferences for the colour blue, and this is particularly among males in the West. They seem to really like blue more than any other colour. For women, it's not quite so determined, but it still plays an important role. It's linked to conservative values. So blue is often associated with those values that maintain the status quo both socially and also environmentally. The blue personality occurs in early childhood. It's associated with the development of speech. Words are used to express desires and feelings and experiences, and these are the ones that children will eventually use to describe themselves and what they desire to their parents. Words are also used by parents to promote reciprocity. You do this and you will get that. So desires are modified according to the words that are used on children to allow them to learn about their social life. Words are used for planning and also for explaining items of experience to children. In later childhood, when the child is associating with lots of other children of different backgrounds, learning is linked to understanding, and understanding then becomes part of that colour blue. The experiences that the child has are questioned. There are shared meanings developed between various children from various different backgrounds, and that enhances the imagination of children. Abstract thinking, of course, comes as a result of all of those experiences, and these are linked to the blue personality. The more blue the personality is, the more likely it is that the person is imaginative, is able to understand other people's experiences, and is able to take on abstract ideas. As a stressor, blue is a feedback mechanism that will determine the type of personality that emerges. There are both positive parental responses and negative parental responses. Let's look at the positive ones first. Listening and explaining things to young children will allow them to understand their experiences in light of their social surroundings. Such explanations are comforting because if you understand what's going on, it is no longer as frightening as not understanding what is happening to you. Explanations can also be rather rewarding. If you know what's going on, you can then also plan to withhold instant gratification for whatever it is that you want out of life. And ultimately, such behaviors, the listening, the explaining, the comforting, and the rewarding of a child will produce a contented child. In contrast, negative parental responses, such as scolding the child or demanding perfection from it when it is unable to produce that sort of behavior, will actually lead to an emotional response to punishment. In fact, scolding is emotional punishment, and that will lead to sadness and low self-esteem in the child, as well as isolation and ostracism. Whether that ostracism is one that is self-generated or comes from outside sources is irrelevant. The child feels blue. Gossiping, bullying, and shaming a child will also result from negative parental responses that will teach a child that being blue is always something to be feared and avoided. Stress responses to blue will follow the same sort of pattern as we've had with all of the other colour personality responses. Firstly, blue as fight. Fight is a white response. It is one that is outward generated. It has both positive and negative values. The positive, fighting as a blue person, gives an assertive rationality to the behavior and the way in which a child will speak. Negative blue, on the other hand, as a fight response, is always verbal aggression. So let's look firstly at the positive response. The child who is assertively rational will rely on logic to portray its experiences. It will promote conflict resolution by understanding what is going on, but also coming up with alternatives to the issues at hand. And it always offers reasonable options, thought out ideas that will explain what it is that it is experiencing and also to justify its own actions. The negative or verbally aggressive blue as fight situation is someone who will jump to conclusions about what's going on without any evidence. They blame others for the problems that arise from their behaviours, and they always use demeaning language in order to try and manipulate the situation. Moving on now to blue as fawning. This also is a white phenomenon. That is one that enables things to be outward directed. Again, it has positive and negative connotations. The positive fawner is someone who is a gentle persuader, whereas the negative fawner is a persistent scammer. The gentle persuader is a comforting carer. This is someone who will look after someone else and, regardless of the situation, will be comforting in the care that they give. They also are an understanding advisor. They will sit in the background and will gently persuade, gently push another person towards a particular conclusion. They are nurturing peacemakers. These people will give of themselves in response to another person's needs, rather than be directed towards their own needs primarily. The persistent scammer, on the other hand, has a narcissistic clinging behavior that enables them to manipulate the people around them. They tend to use very deceptive language to obtain what they want for themselves rather than be oriented towards the other person's needs. Turning now to the black-oriented, that is the inward directed responses. The first of these is blue as flight. Here again, positive and negative aspects. The positive aspect of flight is a calming self-nurture. I look after myself to calm myself down. The negative aspect is that of a person who is socially disconnected and does not want anything to do with other people. For calming self-nurture, the person has some form of proactive preparation. I think ahead of the consequences of what I'm about to do or what is about to happen to me, and as a result of that, I can identify a number of evasive options that are available to me that will get me out of whatever the problem is that is stressing me. This then leads to a measured retreat. I can foresee what's happening, and so therefore I will now remove myself from that situation. The socially disconnected person, on the other hand, proposes alternative facts. They will avoid taking responsibility for any actions through the flight mechanism by telling stories that are alternative views of what has happened in reality. They make illogical excuses for their behavior and will try very hard to bamboozle people into thinking that they have made an error of judgment when in fact the error of judgment is their own. They also fabricate word solids, which are a lot of language used without very little meaning. I'm sure we've all come across people who use blue as flight in this socially disconnected way. The other stress response that is classified as inward directed or black is blue as freeze. Again, positive and negative connotations. The positive connotation is someone who becomes a quiet observer. The negative one is the person who has been enforced to silence. The quiet observer refuses to be drawn into arguments. This person keeps their opinions to themselves and they don't tend to talk a great deal. They are gathering information. What they're going to use that for, we don't know because they don't reveal themselves about it. On the other hand, someone who has been enforced into silence finds themselves with an inability to speak at all about anything much. They can't explain their actions. And this is something that's very common in little children. By the way, never ask a child why they've done something because why simply elicits an excuse. It does not elicit an explanation. So the enforced silence is someone who doesn't know why they did something. They only know how they did it. In the end, the child who is enforced to silence feels defenseless. They are constantly in a state of being put upon. Someone wants information from them, but they are unable to give it. So how then does this affect the adult personality? If we examine adulthood, we find blue can be seen as a strength where blue exists both as a conscious position, that is what I am doing in the real world, and an unconscious drive, what it is that directs me to do those things. As an obstacle, blue also has both conscious and unconscious positions. But the conscious position for blue is the problem behavior that they are exhibiting, and the unconscious drive are the unrequited needs that that person experiences, which lead to the problem behavior. If a person exhibits blue as a current challenge, then this occurs both as a psychological stressor, which is the unconscious drive, and a physical reaction, which is what happens in the real world to that person or by that person in order to deal with that psychological stressor. Let's examine blue as a strength firstly. Here, we find that someone who sees blue or chooses blue as their strength, that person is generally a nurturing person, someone who understands, is very capable and helpful, and tends to befriend others because of their ability to be non-judgmental. Historically, that person as basically had a very contented childhood. Their life was one of ability to be able to overcome problems because those around them explained what was going on and made them feel better for it. They were comforted a lot. There were lots of positive outcomes that were expected by that child as they grew into an adult, and now they create those same positive outcomes for other people. The current situation for the person who has blue as a strength is that they are enjoying peace and happiness in the now. They have a lot of selfless caring for others, and while sometimes that caring can be seen by others as being burdensome, the blue adult personality doesn't view it that way at all. They are humble and they feel calm. As an obstacle, on the other hand, the person who chooses blue as a way to demonstrate what is hampering their lives has a dissatisfied outlook and is feeling sad about most things. Historically, they had inadequate or punitive parenting. They were constantly being harangued by parents to explain something that was inexplicable to them as children, and now as adults, they simply can't express their feelings, their emotions, or explain their actions. They can't overcome a feeling of loneliness or hurt, and that often leads to stages of depression. Currently, though, they lack a caring capacity. They're not interested or able to look after other people's needs. They feel unemotional and isolated most of the time, and as such are unable to connect with people. They struggle to understand the issues that other people have, but moreover, they struggle to understand their own issues. If the person chooses blue as an explanation of how they're feeling in the now, we find that they're existing in a state of peace and quiet. Now, on a positive note, peace and quiet means blissfulness and contentment. I'm happy where I am. Everything in my life is going along the way I would like it to, and I'm feeling good about everything. On a negative aspect, peace and quiet can be boredom and stagnation. They also have a stable life at the moment. Now, positively, stability means that they are comfortable with their lives at the moment. There are no major issues financially, emotionally, socially. On a negative stand, however, their stability is an inability to move on. They're stuck in a situation that seems to be never ending. There are some potential health issues, though, associated with someone who chooses blue in the now to describe what is happening to themselves in their current situation. Firstly, they could have throat and breathing dysfunctions. Often, someone who has a lot of negative blue as a personality will be unable to speak because of a lump in the throat. That feeling is one that prevents an emotion from being expressed in words, and as well, the holding back the speech also leads to holding back a capacity for breathing comfortably. So the person often has a sobbing type of breathing. There is an emotional rigidity that can occur here. The person has rules that they must follow, and if those rules are not followed exactly to the letter, then they become quite agitated and revert to some of the negative aspects of being blue. And finally, there is an inability to nurture themselves. They don't know what they need, they can't understand it, they don't know how to deal with it, and so they don't do anything to help themselves along. So what have we learnt from being a blue personality? Firstly, blue promotes both happy and sad emotions. Preferences for blue are linked to your speech development. The more you are able to talk and express yourself as a child, the more likely it is that you are going to end up with a happy blue personality. The less you were able to speak, the more you were silenced as a child, the more likely it is that you will end up to be a sad blue personality. Blue as a strength produces a calm demeanor, whereas as an obstacle, blue becomes something of an indicator of discontent and, in many cases, overwhelming sadness that can lead to depression. Blue in the present links to stability or stagnation, depending on your orientation, either black or white, positive or negative, and it affects the throat as either ability to speak or ability to breathe comfortably. And that was it for the color blue as a personality indicator. I hope you've learned something from this video, and you'll be back for the next one. I'm going to skip the next color in the basic color term hierarchy, which is brown, because brown is a rather complex color that involves yellow, red, and blue aspects. Instead, we'll be heading towards those more recent colors, and I haven't decided quite which one I'm going to do next. They are orange, pink, purple, and grey. Hope you'll come with me next time around and enjoy what I present. In the meantime, I hope that colour fills your life. Enjoy. See you later. Bye.